Okay, hello Composition Year 3 students. This is the first video I've made for you, so excuse me if I sound a little goofy. I will try my best. Today's topic is about written scoring outside of Logic. Now, if you want to use the Logic scoring facility, absolutely great. And you would have already had some lessons previous, I imagine, about how to use that scoring software, either in year 2 or maybe sometime in year 3 already. But I'd like to talk to you about other options if you wish to take them, namely using Sibelius, which is the market leader, let's say, in notation software. Now, I'm not saying in the slightest that I believe Sibelius to be amazing and the best thing that you can find out there. However, it is the most used by the industry, which from a compatibility point of view is important. And it is specialist notation software designed to do that. So, which makes it so popular. And it's what I personally use when I'm making my written scores. Other notation softwares, of course, plus Logic scoring is available. And many of these things will be similar on MuseScore, Guitar Pro, or any of the other notation softwares that slip my mind right now. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're just going to compose a little ditty, little film ditty, using Logic. And then we're going to go through the processes of either manually transcribing that into notation software or exporting MIDI into notation software, and what we have to do if we want to do that. Unfortunately, the QuickTime screen recorder does not let me use both my screens. I haven't worked out how to do that. Therefore, when it's time to use Sibelius, I'm going to have to grab it into here, which is a bit messy, but it's not letting me use both my screens, so I've got no choice. Right, so first things first, go away keypad. I'm just going to record something very, very short and very filmy using Logic as our first step. I'm going to just record some string chords first of all, and I'm just going to do them in two parts, upper strings and lower strings, just because it's a quick way to get some string chords. You could instead already split your Logic arrange window into first violins, second violins, violas, cellos, basses, and record one note at a time that way. It will save you a job later with your written score. But I'm going to do it this way. So I've got one track that says string longs. I'm just going to call it upper string longs. Then I'm going to create a duplicate using this button. And I'm going to call it lower string longs. So let's see what I can come up with. Excuse my computer, it's having a bit of a hissy fit, but it should come round eventually. I hope. There we go. Always hopeful. Right. Notice how using the mod wheel, already put a lot of dynamics because my samples allow me to to put dynamics on via the mod wheel. Oh, you are not happy today, computer. Oh well. Also notice how my block chords are not neat. Often notes come in before the bar line, they overlap slightly, you know, in order to make it sound natural, in order to make it sound human. That's inevitably going to happen with your audio. It's not going to be quantized or blocked off. That becomes important later. So do bear that in mind. Right. Okay. Okay. Bass. Woohoo. I could only put one, in order to do the dynamics at the same time, I could only actually put one octave in. But I want to double this up. I want double basses in as well. So I'm just going to copy and paste my cello part and stick it down an octave. Just check. Obviously that puts it on the bar line. So I just want to nudge. So it's exactly the same as the cellos. Computer, dear oh dear. Goodness me, I'm going to have to look at the health of this computer. It's cost me a lot of money. I'm not so worried about the mix. This isn't an audio tutorial, but I'm just going to obviously make it sound as good as possible. And to that case, I'm just going to create, what these are doing is just creating ever so slight rowels before bars, just to delay the entries of chords slightly. In fact, I might even do it slightly more. Now, you don't necessarily have to, when you're writing your written scores, put all of these little tempo instructions that I'm putting in. The only one I'd probably put in, you see this really big one I'm kind of doing here, just in bar 8, at that important dominant chord before the pattern starts again. I might put that one in as a rowl, because that's going to be more noticeable, hopefully. obviously I'm being very quick and slapdash here. Normally I would review this a lot and tailor it till it sounds perfect. Obviously with my film, thinking about my film as well. Let's put a little flute. A little flute. Once again, I can do my dynamics using my mod wheel. Might change one note in that. Right. I think I moved slightly late on that last chord. So I'm just going to nudge that. And start. Just going to the mod wheel. Ah, come on. I might, on that note, just go down. That's better. Okay, I'm not going to do anything more than that because my computer might just die. Okay, so I have a very, very short 16-bar score here. Let's save it. Film 1. Let's listen to it if it will let me. Okay. Oh, lucky I don't have to use Logic a lot today. Right, so let's imagine that we're done. We like that. That's perfect for our little sequence of film. Once again, I go back to the fact, let's grab all of these, that it is not quantized. We can kind of see the bar blocks. So there's one chord, there's another chord, etc., etc., most bars. But it's certainly not quantized, and neither do we want it to be. We're doing all these things in order for it to sound good, in order for it to sound natural. And this is the kind of version of something that we want to actually bounce to our film. The version that sounds good. So let's imagine we've done that. Save it, bounce, and then there's no movie in here, but if there was a movie, export audio to movie, and then you'd have your film. Film done. Okay, that's really important to understand. You need to do this first, get your music written, and get your film bounced. Now, what I'm going to do is start preparing my MIDI for use either as a Logic score or in a written score. sorry, Logic score or Sibelius score, I should say. Now I have to do processes to the MIDI in order to make this much easier. And this is why you need to save and bounce your film first. We're going to save this version with all the amendments with a different name. Okay, so I've already got my version. Straight away I'm going to go to Save As. Save as Film 1 Written Score. Different project. It's important because I'm going to start messing with the MIDI in order to make my written score look good. So, when we want to make written scores, it doesn't matter if we're hand transcribing or whatever, but especially if we are going to move the MIDI over, we need to neaten everything up. And there are two things we need to do. We need to quantize, and we need to chop note lengths so that they are not overlapping and not too short either if you've got staccato notes. Otherwise it just brings up loads of rests and you don't want that. You want the flexibility to put dots on your staccato notes. So you see that I've got this massive tied note through here. I'm actually going to chop up those ties for now, just because I know what will happen in Sibelius. Now, a lot of what I'm going to do here is useful for when you're making your written scores in Logic as well, because it will help neaten up the rhythms and make sure there's no weird rhythms going on. So let's just zoom in a tiny bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my alternate pointer and I'm just going to chop this. I'm going to remember that this note is a tie. It's really important to understand that. I'm not actually changing the music. I'm going to remember that this note is a tie and do that later in my written score. I just don't want it tying over. It's going to create loads of parts in Sibelius. So the next thing I'm just going to go and do is all of these notes pretty much are quite long. And if I... Oh, here's another one to chop. I'm just going to chop these. Chop, 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 chop. Actually, I'm going to do one part at a time to make it easier. I might leave this one and show you how I get out of it in Sibelius. This little overlap here. The next thing I'm going to do, these are all the same length. They're all really long notes. So I'm pretty certain if I quantize to the quarter note, if I quantize to the crotchet, that's going to be good. When you're quantizing, if you quantize to too big a note, and you are wanting to have quavers or semiquavers, it will pull it to the crotchet and you'll no longer have semiquavers or quavers in the score. But if you try and quantize to a really small value and you are really inaccurate with the way you've done it, it will end up pulling it to the wrong one. So often you have to find what is a note that is not bigger than the shortest note I've used, so I've only done semi-breves all the way, but is big enough that I haven't done it so inaccurately that it will pull it to the wrong note. So a crotchet will be fine, and if we zoom in, you'll see it's pulled the beginnings of all of our chords to the beginnings of the bar, which is a step that we really need. But there is still another issue with what's called overlapping notes. So if you look here, these two notes overlap, and they can't overlap. So I'm going to have to get rid of that by literally doing that. And we have to go through the whole thing and just check that there are no overlapping notes. So if I zoom in, just check that my notes want to go exactly to the parameter. So I put it exactly to the end without overlapping. So I go through all my chords and make them look like neat blocks. And then when I export my score, it gives it the best chance possible of looking the way it needs to look. Because if you export with overlapping notes, it automatically generates 2 parts in Sibelius, which is not good. Even those of us who know what we're doing, it's a big headache to unravel sometimes. So I just did the upper strings. I'm going to quickly do the lower strings as well. So remember, first things first, quantize to quarter note, click. They're all on the bar. Have a look and check they're not overlapping. So I'm just going to shorten the overlapping notes. You can select more than one at once. Good. And if you have a look at those chords now, they are all exact blocks. They all last exactly a bar. They don't overlap or are too short. Now I just have to do the same thing for the flute part. Now this has got a yadam, it's got a quaver at the beginning. So we just want to make sure that we do it to quavers. Not crotchets, otherwise it will take out that quaver. It will make it ba-da. Now, notice, remember in bar 13, I moved this note because of the way the chord was slightly delayed. I'm now going to move it back again because in the score, it needs to look like it's on the bar line, even though in reality there was a musical pause just before that chord. That doesn't matter in terms of the way the score looks. It's got to be on the bar line. So I'm going to change this to quaver, 8th note, quantize that. Go and check for all these nasty overlapping notes. Good. Now, I've done the tidying up I wanted to do. I've quantized. I have made my notes the exact length without overlapping. Now, if you are going to use logic scoring, it's at this point you would need to separate all your string parts out into first violin, top note, second violin, middle note, viola, bottom note, and then on the lower ones, cello and bass. So you'd have to copy and paste and actually create tracks, violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, bass. I'm going to do a similar thing, but when I'm in Sibelius. So I've got 2 choices here, really. I could either just directly transcribe the score manually from scratch. So I literally look at the score for my upper strings, and sorry about the shmush, but it's not letting me use both my strings, both my screens. So I'm just adding some instruments here. I will go over that in a sec. I'm not going to fully do this by scratch because I think it's obvious. I look at my string chords. It starts in bar 3 and it's in 4/4. I will go over these shortcuts in a minute. Now let's just... Unfortunately, having to use 2 screens is a bit rubbish. 1 screen, sorry, is a bit rubbish. But you might have to use 1 screen, so it's good to see. Now, I can see my upper strings here. First violin, second violin, violas. And here's my lower strings starting in bar 9. And I could literally just do it from scratch. So here my first violin part, we can see it's F semi-breve, G, F, G, E, C sharp, F, G, F, G, E, and it's C sharp for 2 bars. There we go. It's gone on 2 pages now. You could just literally do it like that manually and just, might be easier. To be perfectly honest with you, something this simple, it would be easier for me to just do that. Literally just copy it manually from one to the other, start putting in all the dynamics and stuff like that. But in case you want to export MIDI, I'm going to show you how. So I'm going to get rid of this. So now notice when you open the Quick Start menu, you can select Import. And there's an option to drag in a MIDI file, which we're going to do in a minute. Let me just get rid of that a second. So all we have to do is select our 3 tracks and say export selection as MIDI file. Written score, and it will come up in your folder. Just save it. Here's our folder, film 1. There's our MIDI file. And all we have to do is drag into here, and this dialog box will come up. General MIDI, yes, use multiple voices. Basically what they've got is right. A4 is default if you've got a massive score and you want to make it A3. Not that we're printing it anyway, but you might have more room. You might want to change that, but A4 is default, not B4. Notation. There's a minimum duration of note. If you've got demi-semiquavers, you might want to change that to shorter. It's got some smart settings, staccato when shorter than a certain length, but to be honest with you, it doesn't really work. So it's irrelevant. I don't have any staccato notes. Anyway, just leave them as they are. Okay. And it will bring in your lines. Now notice, despite my best efforts, there's weird things. Like that should be a semi-breve, but it's created it as a separate part semiquaver. Now, sometimes I don't even know why it's done that. It's got all the tempo information that I've put in, and I, to be perfectly honest with you, don't want it. So I'm going to get rid of all of it. Because MIDI information is everything. Can you see all of that, this stuff here? This is all those dynamics that I was putting in. So, unfortunately, it takes 20 seconds or so. There is probably a way, I'm just being lazy and haven't looked. There's probably a way of saying don't import certain things. But it doesn't take that long. I mean, I had a load of mod wheel dynamics on it. Actually, what I could have done, you know what I should have done? Silly other thing that I could have done. I could have gotten rid of those mod wheel instructions, turned them off before exporting as another thing that you do before, whilst you're making your written score version. So look, I even had a revelation today that something I forgot to do. So get rid of any expression or MIDI draw stuff you've put on before you export. Otherwise, you have to spend however long this is going to take deleting it. Otherwise, you have these weird little blobs in your written score. Chat amongst yourselves, have a sandwich whilst I'm doing this. Now, you'll also notice how things don't look right. It's created, despite my best efforts, it's created more than one part. That's why it's got the offset notes. Also, look how it's put everything in treble clef. This is why I said for something this simple, I would have been much faster, in fact, simply copying it manually in the way that I started to copy it. It's only when you have much more big, complicated things, and you're good at knowing your written notation, that copying over MIDI can be really advantageous. Thank you for telling me that. It's not letting me take that off for some reason. I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. Now, notice how it's put a little tempo marking here where I did a big row. I don't want that. What I want to just say instead is use the command Alt-Command-T, which is system writing. It affects the whole system. Alt-Command-T. And I'm just going to put that and position it kind of, it starts about halfway through that bar. And then when I get back to here, Alt-Command-T, I say our tempo. Because this is for real players, it's not for a computer. So you just need to put in markings that real players need, not all the tempo markings as a computer would use them. So I've changed that RAL our tempo. Okay, so we've got our tempo at the beginning, great. We've got a title, all this is useful things. We've got all the random stuff that I don't want the whole time. Remember I said I'm not going to bother with these little humanistic fluctuations. I'm only going to bother talking about the big RAL in bar 8, going back to our tempo again in bar 9. Aside from that, I'm not even going to write them in the score. Now, it's brought over what I told it to. Upper strings, lower strings, flute, which isn't what I actually want. Plus, nothing will come out. It's just going to be a piano sound when this comes out anyway. So I'm going to actually have to create the tracks from scratch. So I press I to get my instruments up, add flute to the score, get my strings, shift, down, 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 which allows you to multi-copy, put my strings in. Yep, do make it fit nice and naturally. And then what I'm just going to do is I'm going to copy and paste the stuff over, just straight away, and get rid of these ones. So if you click quite a few times, it simply selects the entire line, copy, and paste, and you'll see that that flute part is now on the flute line. Woo! I can delete the unneeded flute line from Logic. Upper strings for now, I'm just going to choose a violin. I'm not going to choose viola because I don't want to bother reading an alto clef when I don't need to. So I'm going to just copy the upper strings onto the first violin part. Made an extra bar, don't know why, doesn't matter. Get rid of this. And I'm going to copy the lower strings. Command C, if you don't know how to copy, onto the cello part. At the moment, get rid of lower strings. Goodbye. So now I actually have all my instruments. I just need to separate them out. Now, despite my best efforts, this is dodgy. Dodgy looking. So I need to know what I meant. I could get Logic back open again if I wanted to and just look at what I meant in Logic and just look at my chords to check my notes. This is simple enough that I know, I'll keep it there, but this is simple enough that I know what I mean. And this is what I mean. If you are to do this importing of the MIDI, you need to know what you're doing with notation. I need to look at that and say, that's wrong. What's that doing there? Oops, that's supposed to be a semibreve. Now, if you cannot look at written music and identify that that is wrong, that's supposed to be a semibreve, do not import MIDI. You will not be able to handle it. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that part by selecting everything and saying Alt-1, which means, in fact, I'm going to do it easier than that. I'm going to delete that, turn that rest into a semibreve, just to neaten it up. I'm going to put the D on here by pressing 3. If you press a number above a note, it puts that in that interval. And then I'm going to just delete that rest from the second part. You can just get rid of it like that. Now notice here, it's also created 2 parts. Anything that's in green is the second part, and anything that's blue is the first part. I can override that. If you press Shift, and then click, you can select more than 1 bar. I can do as many bars as I want. Woo! But if I press Alt-1, it forces them all to be in 1 part. And I want that. I don't want 2 parts. That just shows you the reason it does that is because of the tie. Do you remember how I said in Logic, all this tie is going to mess us up? The reason it created those 2 parts is because of the ties of these ones. It's created 2 different moving lines. Sometimes you might want that. Sometimes you don't, and I don't. Alt-1 makes it into 1 part. If I wanted to create a second part, I select the note and I press Alt-2. And that would make that into a second part. But there's no reason to do that. Alt-1, all 1 part. Makes it easier to move. Let me check the rest of them. Here's another example. They've created 2 parts. Alt-1 turns it back into 1 part. Notice how all the cello stuff has got double bass on it too, hence all these red notes. We'll deal with that in a minute. But what I want to do first, just take this first line, is orchestrate out my upper strings. So I'm going to select everything. Select all these upper parts. And I'm going to press Alt-Command-1. And that selects the top note, just to show you. If I press Alt-Command-2, it selects the middle note. I can press Cut, Command-X, Paste, Command-V, stick them on the second violin part. Now there's only 2 parts, so if I say Alt-Command-2 again, I can take the viola notes, cut them, and paste them on the viola line. And I'll do exactly the same with the lower strings. I've only got 1 in this upper one, so take the bottom part, stick it on the double bass. Now I've just got to do it for this line as well. Where's that gotten rid of that chord? See, look, weird things happen. It's just gotten rid of that chord. Luckily, I know it's this. Look, I can select all of those. Copy. And paste. Don't know why it has done that. Which makes it annoying. It means I'd have to do this one by itself. Otherwise, it's going to get in the way. And I'll just do the rest of these. Second violins, Alt-Command-2, violas, orchestrated that out. If I do Alt-Command-2, I take the lower double bass notes and I put them on the double bass. So I've orchestrated this score. I've got all the notes in. There's 2 random empty bars. If I select that bar and say Alt-Command-A, Alt-Command-A, it selects it. Say 16 to the end of score, so it will do both of them. System selection. delete. Let's just move this down so that's not in the way. Good, right. Now, remember we had these kind of dynamics, these crescendos and diminuendos. We're going to want to put those in our score. H is crescendo. Shift H is diminuendo. And it automatically moves them if a tie or something is in the way, which is good. There's no faffing around with elongating. That's what annoys me about Logic personally. It's that dragging and elongating and stretching and stuff. This is just, it automatically formats all of that kind of stuff. If I select the bar as well, if it's the whole bar, that makes it even quicker. Unfortunately, you can't multi-do them. Well, I don't think you can. Let's try. Aha! You can. I've used... By the way, I have to say, this is the first time I've used brand new Sibelius. I upgraded really recently. So, that's even better. Woo! And then the next one goes over both of those bars. Ta-da. What I want to do... Let's see if they've sorted this out as well. I don't think they have. Oh, amazing. You can multi-put on dynamics. Let me show you that. I've selected, shift select all of those. I want them to all start piano. Dynamics is Command E and hold down Command. So I press P, puts it on all of them, and it shifts everything. Up to mezzo forte. Oops, I didn't select all of them. Good, I've got those dynamics on. Seeing as it's exactly the same as the next two bars, I'm just going to copy and paste. And seeing as this is exactly the same as these ones, I'm going to copy and paste again. Just saves. Why does it put them up there? Seconds. Why has it done that? Select. Copy and paste. That's better. Don't know what happened that last time. Weird formatting thing. But I've just, instead of manually doing them all again, as it's just a repeat, I'm just going to copy and paste what I did the last time. Let's start even softer on these chords. Pianissimo. Do these ones with the cellos and basses as well. Good. I haven't done my cellos and basses yet, so I need to go and do them. Piano to mezzo forte. The next two bars are the same. Copy and paste. So now I have my dynamics. Let's sort out our flute line. So this is a smooth slur. Now there was a note bend. Did anyone notice the note bend on this? So I'm just going to insert a symbol by saying Z. You could use whatever one of these kind of you want. It's kind of in weird, but this one will do. If it will allow me, no, it won't allow me to change it. Let's try line. So we could just use a slight portamento line. Let's try that again. There we go. it not allowing me to do that? Both of those. Okay. Make another one. Doesn't really like me doing this. Just copied and pasted it in the middle there. Now we had slight difference here. I'm going to show you another way. I'm going to say crash, which also means getting louder. You could put dim there. And we're pretty much there with this score. Other things I might want to do is put... Why is that put that up there? I don't understand. So it's going very strangely with my formatting. And I don't know why. Having a heart attack, unfortunately. I'll sort it out afterwards, but yours won't have a heart attack. I don't know what's wrong with my software today. But you have to imagine these dynamics are neat underneath like these ones are. I don't know what's going on. This is a great advert for Sibelius, but most of the time it does work properly. Once again, if I say Alt-Command-T, I can say something like Andante Misterioso when the cue enters. Could even put a little double bar. If we go to notation, when the cue enters, begins. Obviously, put composer name. Text. Here we are. It's what comes of using ancient Sibelius 5 for so long. And there we have it. So, yes, apologies for the slight glitches, and as I'm in real time here, I'm not going to bother sorting them out. But that is the idea. You don't need to extract parts, so I'm not going to bother showing you that. But obviously extract it as a PDF. Save it. And you're ready to go. Great, thank you so much. If you've got any questions about this, obviously bear in mind the slight technical glitches, but do speak to me afterwards, between 3 and 4 in that hour. Cheers, bye-bye.